So, last week I gave perhaps what is one of the most negative episodes on my channel to date. Even with me trying my best to talk about some of the good things that Tenchi GXP brought to the table, I think it's clear that when I started yelling loud enough to peak my microphone that I was not a fan of it. But as I said before, just because something is bad doesn't mean you can't enjoy it. And because I really want to show this, today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite movies of all time that's also a really bad movie. It's time to trust the fungus, folks. Let's talk about the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. Yeah, it's time to get into this hot mess, but as I said before, it's a lovable hot mess. We'll get into the exact reasons why it's so troubled here in a little bit, since I want to talk about the movie itself proper first. Being made back in 1993, this was the original video game movie. Nothing before this had ever been done before, and to this day, the number of movies that you can actually call halfway decent that were actually based off video games could be counted on one hand. It really says something on how hard it is to make a video game-based movie, especially when the most well-known directors behind these kind of films include one who just wants to make his wife into a movie star, and the other who just abuses loopholes of his failures for money. So yeah, not exactly the most promising of starts. And speaking of bad beginnings, that's exactly the issue that the movie itself runs into, as after pleasing all of the fans with a Mario opening, we get a narrator going on about dinosaurs. And I'm sorry, but when your opening words in a film are this?
What if the dinosaurs weren't all destroyed? What if the impact of that meteorite created a parallel dimension?
You're going to lose a lot of folks. I get it. Trying to get people introduced into a fantasy world they might not be familiar with isn't exactly the easiest thing to do. But having someone go, "Oh hey, what if this happened? It's the basis of our entire movie," is clunky at best. This also goes for the actual real opening of the movie, where we get to see a baby that will eventually become one of our main casts being left on a doorstep. This is a better idea to start out your movie on, since it does give a bit of mystery to the audience to entice them to figure out what's going on. But then you run into the problem of the movie being advertised as a Mario Bros. Film, and starting off with something that is distinctly not Mario. The only thing in here that gives you even a hint towards that fact is Dennis Hopper's character, whom we see for all of half of a minute, being named Koopa. We then meet the stars of the film, Bob Hoskins as Mario and John Leguizamo as Luigi. And let me say something that will be an ongoing fact throughout the film, is the fact that these two have wonderful chemistry. Even with as horrible as things were behind the scenes, the pair of them play the roles they were designed for perfectly, with Leguizamo having this awkward, goofy younger brother persona, and Hoskins being the more experienced, world-weary elder. You really feel at several points that the actors on screen are their characters, a pair of brothers thrown into an insane situation. After getting introduced to a character who's pretty much used for a throwaway gag later on in the film, we eventually hit upon the true story, as Spike and Iggy here eventually kidnap the now grown-up Daisy and bring them to the parallel dimension that was mentioned at the beginning of the film. And then we get to see this.
Where the hell are we? This is crazy!
Welcome to Dino Hatton. No, I'm not kidding. That's its name. It'll get explained when we get to the background for this film, don't worry. Regardless, we quickly learn just how aggressive this place is between exposition from Koopa about how disgusting their dimension is, while our main characters are dealing with the insane locals, where even little old ladies come armed to the teeth. Things only get compounded further when Mario and Luigi are taken in by the local police. It's then we get to the only scene that our heroes meet up with King Koopa before the film's finale. But this is mostly to serve as an explanation to help fit with the dinosaur setup that the movie has, showing off the fact that Koopa can de-evolve anyone he chooses, which in turn is how the Goombas get introduced into the story, as well as to establish that he's evolved from the Tyrannosaurus Rex. But this is where the movie really starts to lose its pace. Up to this point, where there were a few gags and the occasional one-liners that could put a smile on your face, things have generally been pretty serious. Most of the humor came from the brothers' relationship or the fact that Iggy and Spike just weren't that intelligent. Not out-and-out jokes or silliness. And then we got the escape from the police station where things like the brothers' car ending up going backwards after landing another person's car happens. And this kind of humor continues throughout the film, from Luigi commenting on how they were saved by the fungus acting like a giant booger, to the continued idiocy of the two Koopa cousins even after they get an increase in intelligence, and then stuff like Koopa ordering a pizza all feel out of left field compared to what came before. This script tends to flip back and forth between this seriousness and silliness. That's when the script makes any sense at all, of course. Despite the wonderful acting from all parties involved, with only Samantha Mathis feeling to be the weakest of the cast, mostly because she's around so many big names, it's really the script where things fall apart. One example would be towards the end of the film when our heroes are going to get the meteorite piece that's been front and center of this entire film, bouncing around from character to character. And during this scene, we've got Iggy and Spike going and proclaiming the downfall of Koopa, which just kind of comes out of nowhere since they were wanting to get the meteorite for Koopa roughly 5 minutes earlier. I think probably the biggest thing that just makes me tilt my head and ask, why did you write it like this, was the fact that Koopa, after getting the rock, tells the policeman who delivered it to him to release Lena, a character who had taken it earlier on in the film behind his back. This isn't even mentioning the fact that we don't know exactly who Lena is in the grand scheme of things, other than the fact that she's attracted to the king. She's wanting power, and the fact that she eventually becomes a skeleton in a wall. Or Mrs. Dursley, both are about accurate there. If there are two last bits I want to point out on just how weird and silly this film is, it would be the race down the frozen pipes of Koopa Tower, complete with almost surfer-like music. And then there's also when Koopa actually succeeds in his major goal in merging the two worlds together. Well, Lena does it, but I'm not here to explain the entire movie. Regardless, at this point, Koopa has Nintendo Super Scopes that were designed with the same energy as the de-evolution machine. He tries to use it against Mario only to hit that throwaway character I mentioned earlier.
Monkey!
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be laughing all that much if I saw a person, no matter how bad and crappy they were, getting turned into a monkey. But in the end, that's the kind of movie that the Super Mario Bros. Is. Something that was at times too dark for its own good, an attempt to make a movie based off the colorful and silly world of Mario that, at this point in time, was in its infancy. In fact, now that we're finally able to talk about the background of the movie itself, that's actually part of the problem. One of the biggest impacts that really decided the major theme of the film was the release of Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. Because it was set on Dinosaur Island with Yoshi as a main character, they were wanting to incorporate those elements into the film, which resulted in Dino Hatton. This was something that the producer, Ronald Joff, was really wanting to focus on. In fact, there's a lot here that you can put Joff to task for being responsible. The darker settings we see, so separate from what Mario was known for, that was because Joff and the two directors, Morton and Jankel, agreed they wanted to go. It was thanks to movies like the Batman and TMNT adaptations that were something that they wanted to follow, with Joff even being quoted in the end saying that the Dino world was dark and we didn't want to hold that back. The problem was, in the end, the sheer amount of writers that they had to go through to get what we got. From what I counted, there was a grand total of at least 9 different writers that worked on this movie at any one time, each with their own different influences, ideas, and goals that they searched for. Barry Merrow, the first screenplay writer, for example, wrote his story to be more of a road trip style movie where the focus would be having that stark contrast between Mario and Luigi. Parker Bennett and Terry Runt were the reason for the comedy within the movie, with Ghostbusters being the model here for their addition. Dick Clement and Ian Franos gave us more adult tones and expanded on the female cast, where we got to see Daisy and Lena's character roles grow, and the character of Big Bertha getting introduced. You can see just how crazy things got, even when I'm only mentioning bits and pieces here that resulted in the movie we had today. This isn't even talking about what happened during filming. According to Bob Hoskins, the movie was an absolute nightmare where the directors were constantly fighting and even at one point were ordered off set by their own agent. Things would get so bad that it's claimed that he and Leguizamo would get completely drunk before each day of filming. And even then, there were some things that both actors could see just wasn't going to work regardless, such as the fact that adult content kept on getting put in, with one of the craziest bits apparently being a scene where strippers were involved. Not exactly fitting for a movie based on a game aimed for the 10 and under crowd. Two final things to mention about this weird and wacky movie is perhaps the legacy behind it and what has emerged from it. First would be the website based around it, known as the Super Mario Bros. The Movie Archive, ran by Ryan Haas and Steven Applebaum. These guys are kind of amazing, as they are even bigger fans than I am, and are still updating whenever they can with new material. In fact, back in June of 2021, they found and restored an extended rough cut of the original movie, which includes more scenes of the film, including a segment of Iggy and Spike rapping about how they'll overthrow King Koopa. What's more is the fact that these two actually got together with Parker Bennett, one of the screenwriters, to work on a webcomic sequel of the story, where now the Mario Brothers are having to deal with Wart, inspired by the boss of the character of the same name from Super Mario Bros. 2. It's a bit on the rough side, feeling very much like those dark black and white comics from the 90s. But considering the movie in question, I'm not at all surprised by the feel and story that they were offering here. So I think the question I've got to answer now is, why do I love the Super Mario Bros. Movie so much? Well, like I said last week in the Tenchi episode, nostalgia is a perfectly fine answer here. I grew up with this movie, so a lot of my love for it comes from the fact that it was a favorite of mine as a kid. But then there's also the simple fact that for all of its problems, for all of the issues that the actors, the writers, and even the directors had in making this film, there's fun in it. It has an oddball sort of charm that's enjoyable even when it's bad. That phrase of something being so bad it's good comes to mind, and I feel like this movie fits that bill. It's a confused, conflicted film that can't decide between humor and edginess, and I can't help but love every bit of it. But with all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. But until next time, stay frosty.